Thank you. Well, along the lines of everyone participating, it seems to me, General, that in talking to European ministries of defense recently and parliamentarians from various NATO and OSCE countries, that there is a realization now among our European allies that they're going to have to do a better job of getting to the 2% GDP. I think I'm learning that the French, for example, aren't quite there, but there's a determination to get to 2% of GDP for defense quicker. So how are we doing with that without taking my whole 5 minutes? Across the board in getting our NATO allies to realize that they need to pony up as we're coming to that realization here in Washington.
Senator, I cannot confirm, but on the way here this morning, I read in the press that the French have announced that they are going to raise their defense spending, and so I don't have any details. It's literally watching the press releases as I came to this. But this is, I think there are several nations that are trending in the right direction here. I must admit that most of them are those nations that are in our easternmost positions in our alliance. But we do have nations, Poland, others that are doing the right thing with their investments. But there are still challenges. The nations made this pledge at Wales, as you know. They gave themselves to 2024 to arrive at that. We see nations moving out now. In general, the trend is...
But we certainly need movement in the right direction well before that.
Sir, I agree completely.
And do you agree, General, that it's not so much our persuasiveness as the reality of what they see and the actions of people that would be our adversaries over there?
That is correct. And Senator, the other piece of this also is that with their forces, they are beginning to do all the right things. Great commitment to the VJTF by 6 of our largest nations, European nations committing to be the center brigade of the VJTF. The United States will not be that center brigade right now, and so 6 European nations.
You know, with regard to the thing that Chairman McCain started out talking about with the supplying defensive weapons to our Ukrainian friends, he noted that Madeleine Albright, Henry Kissinger, Secretary Carter, and I think you said you agree with the Secretary of Defense, have all expressed publicly before this committee support for arming our friends with defensive weapons. And I would simply point out, these are not jingoistic cowboys. You know, they're very thoughtful people. They're some of the most preeminent experts we have, and we have the benefit of their counsel here. It seems to me that with a substantial portion of our NATO friends, there's a nervousness that somehow giving people the ability to defend themselves with defensive weapons is going to be a provocation to Mr. Putin and allow him to gin up his propaganda machine. So could you comment on that? And then I do want to ask you about being caught by surprise with what happened in eastern Ukraine. So if we could squeeze that in my few moments.
Senator, a weapon is a weapon, and whether it's defensive or offensive is sort of in the hands of the beholder of the weapon. But there is, as you have
acknowledged, yes.
Yeah, as you have described, Senator, rightly, there is a conversation inside of our alliance. There are nations that do want to provide lethal weapons, and there are other nations who do believe that this is not the correct approach. It is a lively debate, and my position has been stated.
Well, let me just ask you. To me, it was stunning to hear you admit that we were caught by surprise. And I think you were referring to what happened in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine. If we had, and I think you said that right before you advocated a small additional investment in ISR. If we had already had that small investment, would that have prevented us from being caught by surprise by these little green men coming into, men dressed in green uniforms coming into Crimea? And what would we have done had we been aware with better ISR and better intel?
Right. Senator, I'll have to go back and look at the way I use those words. We have been caught by surprise, but mostly it's as it relates to some of these large exercises, like this last exercise that started off being billed as an Arctic exercise. It really turned into a Western military district, Southern military district, and Arctic exercise. And yes, sir, we were caught by surprise for that. In fact, our first tipper to that came from social media, which is an interesting thing. But my concern is that we are in a position where, for all the right reasons, over the past decade and a half, we have refocused our intelligence apparatus, our analysts, our tools on the wars that were going on and on the new threats. And so I blame no one for these decisions. We were focused in areas like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Levant, etc. But what I think we need to consider now, what we as a nation need to consider, is based on the new approach that we see Russia taking to Eastern Europe, we should look at, do we need to refocus any of those assets, be them analyst or actual assets, towards the European program. And I would like to compliment the intelligence community, because they have begun a very dedicated reallocation of analysts to bring to our problem. And I think the problem, and that I have to just absolutely thank them for, but I think that also we need to be rethinking our ISR and other platforms that allow us to have this feel for what's going on in Eastern Europe that we have not considered important for some time now.
Thank you very much. Well, I just commend you, and I'll have to say, apparently the decision makers in this town have decided that we will rebalance toward the Asia Pacific, and that may be the right decision, or it may not. But I cannot think of a troop that's in a hotter spot than you are, and I hope that this Congress and this government understands that the area of responsibility over which you preside is indeed very, very consequential to us right now, here and now. Thank you, sir.
Senator Graham.
Thank you. What's the likelihood, in your view, that Moldova will be in Putin's crosshairs in the next year?
Senator, I think it is an area of his concern and emphasis. I think you are aware, and it's fairly open knowledge, that the forces in Moldova have been retrofitted with new equipment, et cetera, across the past year or so. And we see the sort of interest and rhetoric in that Transnistria region that is concerning, and now we...
Is it kind of almost what we saw in Crimea?
Senator, I don't think it's to that level yet, but it is the leading edge of these kinds of issues.
Do you agree with me it's most likely to occur unless he changes his mind through some recalculation of cost-benefit analysis of what he's doing in the Ukraine right now?
Senator, I agree that I think Mr. Putin is not done in Ukraine.
He's not done in the Ukraine. Moldova may be next. Let's talk about the Baltic states. Can you see a situation, well, is it fair to say that the Russians are trying to stir up problems for the Baltic states with our Russian-speaking population. Is that ongoing right now?
Senator, I think some of the information outreach to these Russian speakers around Eastern Europe, specifically in the Baltics, is searching for the word. It is very good. As we talked about earlier, Senator, before you came.
Good from a Russian point of view.
Sir, exactly.
Bad for us.
Very sophisticated was the word I was looking for, and I
got
couldn't
you.
find it.
What's the worst-case scenario for the Ukraine?
Senator, I worry a lot about the military problem. I worry almost more about their fiscal issues. We desperately need for Ukraine to be able to address the things that the people of Ukraine voted for in their last election, and that is to reform in a lot of ways, and second, they need to get their fiscal business in order, and it's hard to do when your military is in the field fighting.
So one way to bleed Kiev dry is to keep the fight, keep them deployed.
Keep the pressure on, keep the Ukrainian military in the field. Investors are not going to want to invest in a situation where there could be a military conflict.
So that's one way of basically dismembering the Ukraine without having to move to Kiev itself, right?
I believe that's the case, Senator.
Mariupol, the port city, is there a way for the separatists in collaboration with the Russians to basically cut that port off from the Ukrainian government?
Senator, I believe that that is one of the courses of actions that may be considered. The town of Mariupol is a big one, about 500,000 people.
So you don't have to invade it, but they can basically isolate it.
That's correct, Senator.
And what would that mean for the economic survivability of the Ukraine?
Mariupol is very important to Ukraine because it is the port that most of their agriculture passes through, because that area is the
So if you were the separatists or Putin and you really wanted to punish the government in Kiev, that would be a move you would make.
It is a good option to do that punishment.
And would you agree with me, if he takes that option, that is just basically an all-out declaration of war through economic activity?
That is an incredibly big step.
Okay, so if that step happens, what should the Western response be?
Senator, I can't speak for all of the other nations, but I do know that most nations consider Mariupol an important point.
What will we do? Will they increase sanctions?
Senator, I can't answer for them. I think that's certainly
Should we
one of the
increase
tools.
sanctions if they do this?
I think it's the most important that we maintain the ones we have first and not release them.
But do you see this as a provocation taking the whole conflict to a new level?
I do, Senator.
So there should be some red line regarding this port city?
Senator, I don't like to talk about red lines. If you
Well,
draw one,
I
you
just
have
want the committee and the country to start thinking about what I think is almost inevitable. And we need a plan, so you don't have to do it here, but I want somebody from the Pentagon to tell me what you would recommend if they did this provocative act of basically cutting off the port city, which would destroy the Ukraine in a different fashion. Finally, in 1 second, you can take a little bit of time. How does sequestration over time affect your ability to deal with the Ukraine, Russia, and all the problems you have in your backyard, from migration, from a exploding Mideast, the ability to defend our nation from rogue missile attack coming from the Mideast, just a general ability of you to do your job, and what kind of signal would that send to NATO nations if we fully implement sequestration?
Senator, thank you for that question. Sequestration would be very detrimental to our ability to do our job forward. And I'll try to break it into a couple of things. If the chairman will give me a minute or two, I can't do this in 10 seconds. First example we talked about earlier, part of our budget and what we do in Europe is train our partners and allies. As we talked about before, the ability to train Georgians and Romanians so that they can serve beside us in places like Afghanistan. That money will be cut, less Georgians will be trained, more Americans would have to go to the field. So sequestration affects our ability to train and equip our partners and allies. This also affects things as close to us as problems with having airfields open when we need them. The first BCA, the first $478 billion cut is what brought us to having to make changes to things like lodges, like Marone, and only have Marone open during certain hours, which affects our ability to use things like the special purpose MAGTF, et cetera. And then finally, our own ability to train ourselves and to bring rotational forces into Europe. If we've talked earlier about how the rotational forces are part of a way that we solve our forward presence problem. Sequestration would affect the funding for those rotational forces. A rotational force doesn't accomplish its objective unless it is heel to toe, no air, and fully funded.
Thank you for your outstanding service. You've done a good job for us.
General, you didn't mention the effect on morale and retention of this lurching from one year to another. Do you want to mention that?
Chairman, clearly the things that we were able to do, let me first talk to the morale of some of those who are in the fight. It's important that we, I think, show faith with nations like Georgia and others who have come alongside of us, and our ability to continue to train and to provide, as you know, some incredibly good medical care. I think you visited the 5 Georgian soldiers who were in Walter Reed, and these things that we do for them with our budget would be under challenge and clearly affect their morale. For our troops, sir, you flew. You knew that when you were current and you had enough flying hours, you had one approach to your job. When you were less current and had fewer flying hours, you had a different approach to your job. And so it's important that we give our own soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines the training opportunities and support they need.
And they're not getting it under sequestration.
Sequestration will challenge our ability to do that, Senator.
I just wanted to mention one other issue very briefly. The Portuguese are our great friends, and this issue of lodges has turned into one of their biggest issues. Have you looked at alternative uses for the base, such as putting AFRICOM or SOCOM there, or move intelligence? Would you evaluate that again for us? It is such a huge issue for a small country that has been very helpful to us in Afghanistan and Iraq and around. I've been visited, frankly, by their foreign minister and many others that are deeply concerned. So I'd appreciate if you'd have another look at it to see if we can have greater use of lodges.
Senator, we'll do that. You are correct. They are a great ally. They are about to deploy a pretty large aviation contingency into Romania to do air policing in the middle part of our eastern part of our alliance. Portugal is a great ally. And we have done a lot of work already to try to make things better in this lodges issue. Even in the civilian sector, our business executives and defense have been there. So we are on this problem, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and sorry, General Breedlove, I had to be gone at a news conference, and so I'm not sure what all you covered. I want to mention one thing that I was aware of. First of all, I'm sure you've talked about the Ukraine. I had occasion to be in the Ukraine at the time that they had their elections. The first time that it takes 5% in order to get a seat in Parliament. This is the first time in 96 years that there will not be one communist in the Parliament of Ukraine. That's huge. That's really a big deal, and I'm very disappointed in what the military has done there. You know, immediately after that, you had Putin come in, and he's still over there. And I'm sure you've discussed this, but I just wanted to say to you that when you're there, as I was, and experienced a major change taking place that hasn't happened in 96 years, and it's all their allegiance to the West and to the United States of America. We haven't done nearly as much to assist them as I believe we should. What are your thoughts about that?
Senator, first of all, as I visit, I see the same things. Let me just make a silly example. In the past, it has been said of what used to be called the Ukraine rather than Ukraine, that its identity was primarily Russian. I know that as you were driven through the city to go see President Poroshenko or Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, you probably saw the same thing as I did, bridges painted blue and yellow. This is a nation that has woken up to its nationality, and it is a great people, and I believe they are worthy of our attention and help.
Yeah, well, I do too, and I'm glad you mentioned Yatsenyuk because he's a different political party than
Yes, sir.
Poroshenko, and yet they were together in this one thing, and that is their allegiance to us and to the West. Let me ask you about this, because I was following this thing when they were, the idea of consolidating the intelligence assets to Croton. Is that pronounced right, Croton?
It is, Senator. Thank you.
And that made sense to me after what happened in Molesworth. And it would seem the logical place. Now, we're talking about the UK, and yet I understand, I guess in the House, where there's some effort to move that to, of all places, the Azores or someplace like that. I'd just like to get your, do you feel as I do that it's, when the, you know, if it just seems to me that there's a reason to consolidate these assets in a place like UK, and I think it should be done that. What are your thoughts?
Senator, thank you. There was a lot of work done when the siting of this consolidation was considered. Many locations were considered. The business case first is a first point. It points to the current siting plan in the UK. There are other intangibles. The communication pipes in the UK are extremely good and would not have to be altered to take on the new in Croton, would not have to be altered. We would be there close to our UK and other allies who have a great relationship with us in Intel. In my NATO job, the NIFC, we call it, the NATO Intelligence Fusion Center, is there in UK. It would not be able to relocate because this is 28 nations who have negotiated with the UK to stay there. And I think the synergies of keeping our U.S. and AFRICOM and EUCOM capabilities next to our UK partners, next to the NATO NIFC, all of these synergies point to a good solution there at Croton.
Yeah, well, you know, I agree with that. You're making my argument there, and you, for all those reasons. Can you tell me, is there a specific reason that you know of why somehow the lodge's location might be attractive?
Senator, I think there are opportunities there because there is room that is being created by the downsizing of our mission there. There would have to be some changes made, as I mentioned before, communications capabilities, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. My time's expired, but I'm looking forward to the chip of the old block, Dan, coming in to be my intern. Looking forward to that.
Sir, thank you. I will make sure that he is squared away.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh. Others want to be heard?
I want to as
Just
well.
a brief comment. The chairman and Senator Inhofe raised the issue of lodges. This is an issue of very great importance. We've worked very closely with the Department of Defense. Any efforts that you could bring to bear to repurpose the facility, to provide continuing presence of a significant nature, I would appreciate personally, also generally. And again, thank you for your efforts.
Thank you very much. Senator King?
General Breedlove, this comment really isn't directed at you, and so I don't want you to batten down the hatches or pull over the canopy, I guess, in your case. This government spends over $70 billion a year on intelligence, and I hate hearing the word surprise in any hearing. And I get frustrated when I hear about your need for ISR. And I have the greatest respect to the people in the intelligence community. I work with them quite frequently as a member of the Intelligence Committee. But I want you to think of yourself as a customer and suggest that you might talk to your colleagues in the other commands, because I think sometimes we forget who needs the intelligence, and you're the guy that needs it. You're the customer, and you need to advocate for adequate intelligence resources, whether it's from the civilian intelligence community or the Department of Defense, which, as you know, has a very substantial intelligence budget. And I think this is something we need to continue to think about, because sometimes these agencies go on their own momentum and lose track of who needs the information and what they actually need. So this really isn't a question, General, except more of a suggestion. But I got to tell you, when I think about $70 billion of the taxpayers' money, like I say, I don't like hearing the word surprise in any of these hearings. I appreciate your testimony.
Senator at Risk, may I respond just a
Yes,
little?
certainly.
Absolutely.
I want to pay the proper respect to decisions that have been made across the last 15 or 20 years, because I do believe we've been trying to make Russia a partner, and we have come into conflicts in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We've come into great issues in the northern part of Africa. So I do not want to stand as critical to the decisions that have been made with the limited assets of intelligence. And I believe that our intelligence community has kept a great focus on those things are very dear to us in Russia, if I can stop at that point. But I think that you are absolutely correct, that now we see that there is a different problem, and we need to look at how we apportion and allocate. I already see, as I mentioned earlier, the intelligence community making clear decisions to reallocate analytical capabilities, et cetera. And I will be a customer, sir. I have been vocal, and I had it in my opening remarks here, as you saw. I am beginning to advocate that we look at reapportionment of those assets as well. So I agree with your line of logic, Senator.
Minimal trust and lots of verification may be this answer.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Wicker, anything else? No. All right, we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much for your attention today and for your service.
Thank you, sir.